Yeah, Mike said, my name's Mike Bye, I'm an alcoholic.
Bye.
Through the grace of God, who's gifted me the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, lovingly and caringly delivered to me by people like you. In rooms like this, I have not found it necessary or desirable to take a drink or a substitute drug, with the exception of caffeine, nicotine, and sugar. Y'all laugh. I did that once on a panel, and about 6 old-timers wanted to kill me. But I haven't found it necessary to take anything since October 7th, 1985. And for that, I'm eternally and profoundly grateful. But, yeah, there are a lot of other people who are real grateful about that. So, Mike said you're gonna take this thing. Let me put that down. And you know, I'm a drunk, and I just want to yell. I want to cuss like 14 foul words into the damn thing. I try not to do that. Before I go any farther, I got to do a 10th step. I lied tonight. When the policeman pulled me over in Rockingham and said I was going too fast, I said, gee, I didn't know, and I knew I was going too fast. Okay, now we've taken care of that. I'm a proud and grateful member of the Anson group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we meet in Wadesboro on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursday nights at 8 o'clock and Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock. And at the AA facility in Wadesboro. And if any of you are in Wadesboro at any point in time, when we're having meetings, we'd be happy if you could find your way out there and share your experience, strength, and hope with us, because God knows we need it. I have a sponsor, he has a sponsor, he has a sponsor, he has a sponsor, I have a kind of strange sponsorship situation right now. My sponsor died several weeks ago, and he's the second one I buried in the last 3 years. And so I asked the guy who was kind of doing sponsorship for me before if he'd be my sponsor again. And he doesn't have quite as much sobriety as I do. But I respect his program, and I respect his sobriety, and I respect his opinion. And so I asked him if he'd be my sponsor. The problem is that I sponsor his sponsor. Now, I know that isn't a problem to most of y'all. But if you think about it, that's real. Us drunks are real good about thinking about it. Suppose I go to my sponsor with a real difficult problem, and he can't figure out what the answer is. And he goes to his sponsor and says, what should I tell him? And his sponsor can't figure it out. And he goes to his sponsor, which is me. And then I'm giving advice to myself. When Wiley was speaking, she said, she made a mistake when she was doing the traditions. She said, we ought to be autonomous. And I thought autonomous means independent and self-governing. I don't want to be autonomous. When I was independent on my own and running my own life, things did not go well. I like being dependent on y'all and on God of my understanding, and on 12 steps in that book. I do have a question, Mac, though. You can think about it. They said I could ask a question after the meeting. Are these people as strange as they look? I mean, they all look strange except for Paige. I thought you were going to wear a costume. I want to thank you for the introduction, but you forgot to mention how humble I am. Because, you know, when you're humble and nobody notices, it's really a drag. You know? Okay. Let's get on. I took my first drink at 13. I would like to tell you that it ruined a brilliant career in a number of fields. The reality was that I wasn't going anywhere at 13, and alcohol just kind of accelerated the downhill process. Yeah. You know, I was short, I had red hair, I had freckles, I had blue eyes, I was Irish, I was cute as hell. And I worked it as much as I could. And I worked because I was petrified. I was scared to death of everything. And I covered it up with anger and bravado and arrogance, because I didn't want you to know how scared I was. You know, I played football, and I was the second smallest player in 4A football in North Carolina. And I would run over the middle, and some big, ugly, mean-looking linebacker would just kill me. And I'd lay on the ground. And part of me would say, don't get up, just let them carry you off, because they're just going to do it again. And another part of me would say, you got to get up, because people will think you're weak. If I had a lick of sense, I'd have stayed on the ground. But I was afraid. I was afraid of everything. I was the favorite child in my family. I was the only boy. I was the baby. And my sisters, were they alive today, would tell you that I got everything I wanted, and I did. And I worked it as hard as I could because I thought I needed it. And I tried to be as cute as humanly possible because I wanted you to like me, and I wanted to get by, and I knew somewhere deep down inside I didn't have what it took. And so when they fed me that first drink, which was homemade liquor, in a bark shed outside of a house in Whitmire, South Carolina, and it was some kind of rite of passage for my family. My family's all alcoholic. Everybody's alcoholic. Grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, sisters. And I can say that because most of them spent some time in here. Some of them died sober, and some of them didn't. But almost everybody showed up in these rooms. You know, when I got here, I can't say I never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I was 6 years old. They were dragging me to meetings. You'd think I'd have listened. So anyway, I'm 13 years old. I'm scared to death. I'm absolutely petrified. I go out to this bark shed, and my great uncle hands me this bottle. And I take a seat, you know, and I'm the kind of guy who wants to fit in, so I sort of scope out the situation real quickly, you know, and figure out what I'm supposed to do to fit in so I don't stand out and everybody likes me and I'm doing what's right. And my great uncle takes this bottle out. He takes a swallow out of it. He goes, and then he said something real smart. And he handed my daddy, and he took a swallow out of it and went, and he said something real smart. Now I'm not a stupid kid, and I figure out I know what this is about. You take a swallow out of whatever's in this damn bottle, you go, and then you say something real smart. So I'm thinking, you know how we do, I'm thinking in my head, what am I going to say that's real smart? It's going to make me look good. And I take the bottle, it's my turn. And I tipped it up and I took a swallow and I tried with everything I could to go, and I went, and I didn't say anything real smart, but what I thought is, these people have figured out that I don't have what it takes and they're trying to kill me. They figure out somebody else is going to learn and I'm going to be ashamed to the family and they're going to kill me, bury me outside of a bark shed in Whitmire, South Carolina and say, we don't know where he went, he just wandered in. And I swore to God, I swore with everything in me after that drink that I would never, ever, ever do that again. That I would not touch another drop of that stuff. 10 minutes later, I changed my mind. Was the first time I changed my mind about drinking? Was not the last. Came back around and what happened in those 10 minutes? You know, I mean, I didn't get drunk, but I describe it, and I've done this before, but I describe it, and it works. I know it works for the guys. I know it works for the girls. But it's like the first time you ever kissed a girl. You have no idea what you did. You have no idea if you did it right, but you can't wait to do it again and see what happens next. And somewhere down in the bottom of my tummy, there was this little tickle saying, hey. The second time it came around, I took a drink. I poured as much of it down my throat as I could. I coughed, I spit, I gagged, almost threw up, and I waited. Now, they say that there are two kinds of alcoholics. There's a type B alcoholic who, after a period of drinking, crosses that line and turns into an alcoholic. And there's the type A alcoholic who are instant alcoholics. Now, I'm a type B. I had a period of social drinking that lasted 10 minutes. The closest I have ever got to social drinking after that 10 minutes is somebody say, I want to drink. I say, socialize. I kept that bottle up. I poured as much of it down as I could, and I waited. And I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the magic happened at that moment. The skies opened. The stars shone bright, the angels sang, and the trumpets blared. And for the first time in 13 years, I was okay. For the first time in my life, I was at peace. I was a man among men. I had become 13. They had given me a drink. I was now an adult member of the world. I was ready to take over. And if the old guys didn't move aside, I might just stage a coup, by God. It was the most wonderful feeling I've ever felt in my life. My friend Cliff says that any good alcoholic, after 7-8 minutes of drinking, will get about 10 minutes of okay. And I got my 10 minutes of okay. I describe it to people like, it's like that feeling you get when you just know and you go, I got this. But for the first time in my life, I got this. And that launched a drinking career. 25 years. Raging alcoholism, substituted by dry goods. It was, I was a blackout drinker, I was traveling drunk. That's a bad combination. Keep winding up in places and you don't know where you are and you don't know how you got there. I ask the 3 favorite questions of any alcoholic, Who are you, where are we, and what in the hell are we doing here? I laid in bed, found a body next to mine, and I prayed that prayer we've all prayed. Dear God, I don't care how old, how fat, how ugly, just please, God, make it a woman. Oh, y'all laugh, but hell, we get to drink and all bets are off. Kevin came up with me today, and Kevin's from Anson County. He's an original, and he prayed the same kind of prayer. It was a little different. He said, please, God, make it a human being. And the moral of that story is if you want to be a high-bottom drunk, move to Anson County. But I went on a tear. The next 25 years, I drank every chance I got. I made it through high school without being a daily drinker. But by God, I was hell on the weekends, man. I got to college, and I started out only drinking on the weekends, and then the weekends kind of got longer and longer and sort of bled into the week, and it was all over but the shouting. I'll tell you one story, and then I'll get me sober. I was drinking in a bar in Charlotte, North Carolina, called the Gay 90s. And I used to go in there every Friday night because they had happy hour and get a draft for a dime. And they had a little machine there that you could get a handful of pistachios for 5 cents. And I would go in there with a $5 bill. And I would drink. And then I would leave and go home and stop and get a 6-pack on the way home with the change. And I did that every Friday night. Well, I started out and I did that one Friday night. And the next thing I knew, I was standing in a big city, and this was before Charlotte was a big city. In a big city, and it was cold. And I had no idea where I was. And I had no idea how I got there. Now, I know how to deal with things if you don't know how you get there. You know, if you go to some sporting event or concert or something like that, and, you know, you're in a blackout and then you come to at the end and you wonder where you parked your car, you just wait till everybody leaves and the last car in the parking lot is yours. And the problem was I didn't think I could get everybody to leave whatever town this was, so I could find my car. And so I'm standing on the street corner and I looked over at this man and I said, "Excuse me, sir, I seem to be lost. Could you tell me where I am?" And he said, "You're at the corner of so-and-so and so-and-so," which is real helpful when you don't know what state you're in, by God. And I finally said, "What town am I in?" And he said, "Chicago." And I said, "Like in Illinois?" And he moved real far away from me on the street corner. And reached my hand in my pocket. And I started out with $5 and I had $420 in the pocket. And I don't know how it got there. And I don't want to know. Now, I'll tell you what I was like, because that's what I'm supposed to do, is tell you what I was like. I'm standing on a street corner in Chicago, Illinois. It is Monday morning, and the last thing I remember is it's 5:30 on Friday in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, any person with any brains at all would have immediately at least sensed a mild sense of panic and started to determine the reason for this problem. The first thing I thought of was, how am I going to lie? What story am I going to tell in order that people do not think my drinking caused this? That's the first thing that came to my mind, standing on a street corner. Not, "Oh my God, what the hell did I do?" But, how do I get it so nobody blames me? That's what goes on up here. The people who live here are not my friends. You know, them voices they're bad stuff. I took the $420, I got a cab out to O'Hare Airport. I got a one-way ticket back to Charlotte. Thank God it was a long time ago, because they wouldn't let me on the plane. I had no baggage and I looked like hell. You know, I'd like a one-way ticket to Charlotte. Yeah, right. You know, you and the TSA are going to get along real good. I came back in. I got a cab from the airport back to where I was staying, because I lived in Gastonia. And I prayed the whole way, "Please God, let my car be there." But the other thing I thought was, if it isn't, I'll just tell them somebody stole it. Somebody stole my car and drove it to Chicago. How awful. That's the way I live my life. You know, trying to figure out how to cover up drinking, because I had to drink. Because I had to feel that, I got this. I had to be okay. I couldn't live in the fear. You know, I've heard said a lot, I did not have a drinking problem. I've never had a drinking problem. I've never had a problem with the way I drink, and I've never had a problem with what happens when I drink. Now, there are lots of other people who do. You know, their children and wives and employers and judges and cops and people who claim to be my friends. They had a lot of problems with the way I drank and what happened when I drank. But they didn't understand that all this was a small price to pay for me being okay. So I had to live, you know, under the bridge for a little bit. I was in the middle. You know, the guys on the edge were unmanageable, because when it rained, they got wet. A small price to pay for being okay. What I had was a sober problem. My entire drinking career is an effort to walk that razor edge between knee-crawling, tree-hugging, throw-up, and rolling it drunk, and stark raving sober. And I almost never fell off on the stark raving sober side, because I got crazy. First 3 years I was sober, I was awful. I should have been locked up somewhere. I really should have. I mean, it was terrible. I came into this program in 1968. It took me in 1985 to get sober, and the reason was that I quit drinking. And And it would last a day or a week or a month, or I think even once I almost made 3 months. And by the time I got to that, I was homicidal. I was suicidal. You know, I knew if I didn't get a drink in me, I was going to explode from the inside and just disappear into dust. I was terrified. And the only thing I knew that would take care of that was a drink of alcohol. On October 7, 1885, I was called into the office of the Bishop of the Diocese of Maryland. For those of you who don't know, they call me Father Mike because I'm an Episcopal priest. I walked into that room and I immediately knew what was happening. I was going to be the beneficiary of an intervention. Just like on TV. They didn't have TV. And the reason I knew that was that 2 out of the 3 Johnson Institute certified alcohol interventionists in the Diocese of Maryland were sitting there. And the reason I knew that out of the 3 alcohol interventionists in the Diocese of Maryland, Johnson's Institute certified alcohol interventionists in the Diocese of Maryland were sitting there was I was the 3rd one. Just showed you the kind of quality employees the church has and how well they screen us, by God. And they went through the normal stuff. And I knew the deal. I knew the minute I cleared that room, I knew there was a bed at a drunk farm somewhere and I was going to be in it. And I tried to negotiate. Well, if you think I'm drinking too much, I can cut back. One of the guys who's a friend of mine now, Mike, he laughed so hard he almost wet himself when I said that. He thought that was hysterical. And I said, well, I guess I could quit. And that didn't sell, so I decided to go for the killer. Well, I guess I could go back to A&A. God help us. And the bishop turned to me and said, you can go get sober. Well, what he said is, if you don't want to do this, you can leave the keys to your house, the keys to your car, the keys to the church, your credit cards, your checkbook, and your collar on my desk. And you can leave. And don't ever come back. And if you do, don't give us as a reference for a job, because we'll tell them you're nothing but a damn drunk and not tired. Or you can go get sober and stay sober. So I decided, and you got to understand, I had my last drink at 7:30 that morning, and it was now about 11:15. And if you're the kind of drinker I was, and you're that long without alcohol, you're starting to get that feeling down in the middle of your tummy. You know you're about to turn into a vibrator in about 20 minutes if you don't get any alcohol. And I've been around AA long enough to know that if you went to rehab, they had to stop and get you a drink before you got there. And so basically I went to rehab in order to get a drink. I mean, that was my motivation. And I got in the car and we went and we stopped and I got a half a pint of scotch and a 6-pack of beer. And when I got to the rehab, I was okay. Because I knew what was going to happen was that after about 3 days, these people would understand, the rehab would understand that these people who did the intervention were well-meaning but terribly misinformed people, and they would send me home. 36 days later, in a 28-day program, I was allowed to leave. Now, I don't know what the difference between that one and anything else I did for the 17 years I was in and out of here and in and out of nut huts and in and out of rehabs and all the rest of that stuff was. But I knew, though, the one thing that happened was that the people in AA and Alcoholics Anonymous in Annapolis, Maryland, mostly the old-timers, were sick and tired of me coming by stealing their white chips. And so they decided to pick a sponsor for me. And they picked the meanest, nastiest, ugliest, rottenest SOB in Alcoholics Anonymous in Annapolis, Maryland. He was gruff. He was a fireman. He knocked on my door the day I got back from rehab to take me to my next first meeting. He was about 5'6" tall. He weighed 220 pounds. There was not an ounce of fat on him. He had biceps the size of my thighs. He had slick back hair. He had bad dental work, and he had tattoos head to foot. And in 1985, I didn't do tattoos, ladies and gentlemen. He looked at me and said, "Get in the car." I said, "Wouldn't you like to meet the family?" He said, I'll talk to them when you're not around." In the driveway of my house was a 1967 Blue Mercury automobile. At least that part that wasn't primer was blue. I walked out to get in the car. Passenger side didn't open. Any decent human being would let you slide across the seat. Not my new sponsor. You got to climb in through the window. He started the car up. He backed it out of my driveway, and I found the most interesting feature of his vehicle was that the passenger seat was not attached to the body of the car. So he went backwards, I went forwards, he went forwards, I went backwards, and we were off to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, he picked me up at 7 o'clock, and we had a telephone conversation in which I pointed out that the Birdsville meeting to which we were going, which was at 8:30, was 5 minutes from my house, and we didn't need to leave at 7 o'clock. So at 7:05, when we arrived at the Birdsville meeting, just like I told him, having beaten both the coffee makers and everybody else in the world to the meeting and parked in the parking lot, we started talking. Well, at least he talked. I tried to talk. He could care less what I had to say. And we started talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I told him I was working on the fourth step, or the fifth step. No, I was working on the fourth step. And he said, "Not anymore." And I said, "I beg your pardon?" And he said, "You're working on step 1A. And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't think I know what 1A is. That's powerlessness." He says, "No, step 1A. I said, "What is that?" He said, "Get in the car." And for the next 3 months, that's what I did. Get in the car every damn night at my house. Now, I had a driver's license, valid, insurance, a nicer car than he did, but I wasn't allowed to drive in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Get in the car, go to the damn meeting. Finally, the coffee makers got there. We got out. We helped them set up. We stood outside. We were smoking cigarettes, talking. Well, they were talking. I tried to talk. Nobody cared less what I had to say. Not welcoming the newcomer very well, I might say. We started into the meeting, and he grabs me by the arm, and he says, if they make a mistake and call on you in there, you tell them who you are and what you are, and you need to listen. And I said, I don't understand. He said, who you are is Mike, what you are is an alcoholic. And the next words out of your mouth are, I need to listen. And I said, you mean you want me to pass? He said, you never pass in AA. You say, I need to listen. I said, why would I say that? He said, because you need to listen. I said, suppose I have something to share. He says, we don't care what you have to share. I said, why not? He said, anything comes out of your mouth's a lie. We got out of the meeting. We get in the car. We go zooming past my street. I say, Bob, I think you've missed the turn. He said, no, we're going to Denny's. Denny's. I am somebody, by God. I am a clergyman in the Episcopal Church. I have testified before the United States Congress. I am personally acquainted with the head chef at Le Leon de Or in the Watergate Hotel in Washington, and he's taking me to Denny's to sit with a bunch of other people with tattoos where they will ignore anything I say. This is not the way you welcome a newcomer. It isn't loving me till I can love myself. It's not making me feel important and loving and welcome and all that other crap. It's a way they keep you sober. The next 11 months, I did what he told me to do, and I didn't drink out of fear of sponsor and because of the intervention of you people and God. I tried to drink. I tried to drink a number of times. And every time I tried to drink, God would pop one of you damn A&A people up in my life. I was on an airplane. Nobody knew me. I was going to drink. The damn stewardess is an AA. And my stupid sponsor had given me a big book, which was laying next to my seat. And she identified me as a fellow member of AA, and I'm getting ready to order a double Tanqueray and tonic. 25,000 miles in the air. Lie, I'm not working the steps through my heart. I'm doing what he tells me to do, but I don't believe it. I'm just marking time to get the heat off. Because I'm going to drink again. Because I'm crazy, and I'm afraid, and everything inside of me is screaming. I'm chasing my kids with bats and knives because I don't like the way they said thank you. I'm tearing phones off of walls. I'm throwing food. I'm doing crap I've never done before. There was never violence in my house until I got sober. And I had to hit something because I was going crazy. 11 months sober, everything's going nuts. And I'm going to kill somebody. I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's my family. I don't know if it's a large number of strangers. I like that one. Blow up the Bay Bridge on Memorial Day weekend and watch them all die. Because I'm miserable. And the only thing I think about is me. And I made a terrible mistake. Now, if you're new here and you're just here to get court slip signed or get the heat off or get back in the big bed or get your job back or whatever the hell it is you want. I made a terrible mistake. I told my sponsor the truth. Don't ever do that. I'm at the Arnold 12 and 12 meeting and I tell him how crazy I am and how awful my life is and how much I hate AA and how much I hate you people and that you laugh all the time and nothing's funny and you have all those stupid slogans and it's like you died and went to Hallmark and just nothing's good. And he looks at me with this Zen-like pose. Now, this is the meanest SOB you've ever met in your life. He cusses all the time. You know, he's just a mess. And he gets this real Zen-like thing on his face and goes, well, I guess life will just unfold as it unfolds. I'm petrified of this man, and I snap, and I grab him by the shirt collar, and I say, you don't seem to understand. I'm going to kill somebody, and you just moved to the top of the list. Not that he had very far to go to get there. And he said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, you're so damn smart, why don't you tell me what to do? He looked at me and said, why don't you join AA? I said, what the hell do you think I've been doing the last 11 months? He said, visiting. That was exactly right. And I wish I could say I joined AA at that point in time. But I waited 2 more months, and I was 13 months sober. I already picked up a year chip. And I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, the worst emotional pain I've ever been in my life. I was crying, and I had no idea why. And I rolled out of bed, and I knelt down by the side of my bed, and I looked up at the ceiling, and I said, dear God, please help me. And I believe, without any doubt, that that's the day I hit my bottom. I really do. I think that's when we all hit our bottoms. Our bottoms may look different. Some of us may be in jail. Some of us may be divorced. Some of us may be, unemployed. Some of us, like my friend Roger, might have thrown up in his Mercedes 500 on his Botany 500 suit on the way home to his $1 million house in Colombia to his beautiful wife and 3 kids. But he said the same thing when he came to. I mean, he pulled over because he was too drunk to drive. What kind of decent alcoholic pulls over because they're too drunk to drive? But he woke up with puke all over him in his expensive car. And he said, dear God, please help me. And I rolled out of bed and I said, dear God, please help me. And I heard the voice of God for one of the first times in my life. And said, why don't you join AA? Who knew that God sounded like Bob or Bob sounded like God? I went downstairs and I opened up the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and I read it for the first time. I read it for, I don't know, probably the 400th time. But for the first time in my life, I put Mike in those pages. See, up until then, I had come in here and I had taken the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and I had fitted in my life, and those parts that stuck out and didn't fit, I would trim off. And what I began to do was take my life and fit it into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and those parts that don't fit, I had to trim off. We went through the steps again. I went through the steps with a sponsor. Bob left. He went to Florida. I got a new sponsor. He was just as mean and nasty as the other ones. And they began to explain things to me. Began to explain that the reason the first step is that I got a head that's like this, and I got a world that's like this. And all my life I was drinking and using other things to make the world go so it matched. Because if my head's like this and the world's like this, I experience what's called cognitive dissonance. Isn't that a neat word? It means you're screwed up. That's a technical term. And they explained to me that in Alcoholics Anonymous, rather than taking the world and go so it matches, we're going to take your head and go like that and it'll match. The problem is that my mind is like a rubber band and keeps snapping back. And so I have to keep coming here and getting readjusted. Which means that 28 years later, I'm still going to 5 meetings a week. Because my mind would just go to bad places all the time. Taught me about a God. I worked for God. I had a degree in God. I had a PhD in God. And they introduced me to a God that I didn't know about. What they did was, I knew a lot about God, but I didn't have a relationship with God. And they taught me about a God I could have a relationship with, and I didn't need to understand. Tommy Flynn got up in my face in the Magathie 12 and 12 meeting and said, I know you've taken the A course. And I said, what's that? And he said, oh, you know Augustine, Anselm, Aquinas, all those guys. I said, yeah. Well, I didn't do it. I said, yes. I was still a wee bit arrogant. He said, let me tell you about theology. And I said, what's that? He said, find God or die. So I found a God, so I didn't die. And they allowed me to make a decision, turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And they told me what that meant was that I was going to do 5 through 12. And I said, why is that? And they said, that's the way drunks turn their will and their life over to God. You know, church has other things. They do real well with normal people. They don't do well with us. You know, I mean, they don't do well with people dressed like mummies. Give me a break. And I did 4. And I told somebody else about it. And I was ashamed. I knew they'd never talk to me again. And that night at the meeting, they came up and hugged me and asked me how I was doing. And I was shocked and thought, you don't have very high standards for your friends. I did 6 and 7, which are important and much undersold. Most of us are not willing to have God remove all our defects of character. What we actually want is for God to put them up in the closet. You know, in your mother's house where there's that closet, way up top is the stuff she never uses but might need sometime. And it's still there after she dies and you've got to clean it out. That's where I want my character defects. I mean, I want them up there. My God, suppose I need them. Suppose I'm driving in Charlotte and some SOB cuts me off and I go for anger and God's taken away. What am I supposed to do? Just let him go? Not chase him down, give him the finger? Suppose I'm in an AA meeting, some really good young woman walks in, and I go for lust and it's gone. What in the God's name am I going to do now? How can I talk to her? They suggested maybe treat her like a human being. God, who would have thought that? I did 10, 11, 12. And I'm pretty good at 10 because I already did one tonight. I started praying. Now, I prayed for a long time, but there weren't any answers. There still aren't answers, but there's a sense of peace. And then they told me that after all this, I get to go out, pick up a drunk, put him in the car, take him to a meeting, let him throw up in my car on the way there. Isn't that a wonderful thing? That's what I get to do. Drive some jackass to detox at 2 o'clock in the morning. Just what I want to do. Give me a wonderful life. But what happened to me is that the fear went away. Now, I don't get up in the morning and go, oh, I got it. Because, people tell me that God won't give me anything that I can't handle. Excuse my language, that's bullshit. If it was true, why do I need to ask God for help like 40 times a day? God will not give me anything that he and I together can't handle. And so I get up in the morning and I go, we got this. God and I have this. AA and I have this. All the people that have been put in my life because of this program, we have this. I've been restored to a position of respect in my profession. Today, when the bishop calls me to Raleigh, it is not to tell me that I'm screwing up. Mostly it's to ask me what we should do with this other drunk priest. What are we going to do with this drunk priest? Just shoot him. It'll be easier for him. I've had my family restored to me in amazing ways. I got a kid here somewhere sneaking up on 4 years in this program. And you gave him back to me. I mean, there's nothing in the world that I can never pay y'all back for giving me back my kid. And God knows I tried to get him sober for 8 years. You know, he'd come into the program and I'd suggest who ought to be his sponsor. Then I would suggest what his sponsor ought to be telling me, and for some reason he didn't listen. And when he hit his bottom and said, "Dear God, help me," he went and got his own sponsor, who happens to be one of my grand pigeons. I mean, I sponsored his sponsor, and I suggested to him what he ought to be telling my son, and he told me to shut up and mind my own damn business. Just shows that the guy I sponsor is not teaching his sponsors how to be properly respectful to the elders in this program. But strangely enough, when that happened, he got sober. But the most amazing thing that has happened to me are two things, two most amazing things that happened. First of all, you introduced me to a God of my understanding. And you taught me how to listen to that God. I've always wanted to hear the voice of God. I mean, that's why I became a priest. I thought maybe if I put on the funny collar, he'd talk to me. I always wanted, I mean, all my life, if God would just make the instructions clear. I mean, hell, if he just put a note on the refrigerator like everybody else, I could follow it. I was on a meeting of Alcoholics one day. Actually, it was before the meeting. And a guy was talking, his name's Phil Kroll, he's dead now. And he said some things. And it was the voice of God. It was the voice of God. Phil's lips were moving. And it sounded a lot like him, but I knew it was the voice of God. And today, anytime I want to hear the voice of God, anytime at all I have to do is go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and listen very carefully to everything that's said. And somewhere in that meeting, I will hear the voice of God. Some days it sounds like Paige, and some days it sounds like Mike, and some days it sounds like Kelly or Richard, and God knows even occasionally it sounds like Kevin. It's really scary when that happens. But I hear the voice of God telling me what I'm supposed to do. The last gift that I have been given is that I have been allowed to hang out with you people. If you're here tonight and you're not sure if you want to stick around, don't drink just so you can hang around with these people, because they are the finest people on the face of the earth. My father attended Alcoholics Anonymous for 42 years. The longest he ever stayed sober was 2 years and 10 months. He was drunk the night before he died. I was at his funeral, and I was standing by the little book that you signed. The body was in there, and I'm standing by the good, greeting people and doing good son stuff. I'm a year sober. And 3 guys from his home group in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina walk in. His sponsor and 2 other guys he used to run with. I shook their hands and I said, I'm really grateful that you all are here, and Mama will be very happy to see you and all this kind of stuff. One of them said, well, I don't know about you, because I was living in Annapolis at the time, or Delaware or something. I don't know about you, but down here, we bury our own. I let it pass. Behind them were like 30 people. And they came in, they signed the book, and they shook my hand, and someone said, I knew your father from AA. And some of them said, I didn't know your father, but I'm a member of the home group. 30 people at a funeral for a drunk who was drunk the night before. And they came to express their condolences. And I walked into the room, and John and Bill and George were there. And I went up and I was talking to them. And they said again, you know, we bury our own. I said, what are y'all doing here? He said, we bury our own. I don't know about what you Yankees do. I said, he wasn't a member. He was drunk the night before he died. And John Gaddis, some of you know from Myrtle Beach, looked at me, and I've never seen that man mad in my life until that moment. Fire flew out of his eyes. And he poked his little short guy shorter than me, and he poked his finger up my nose, and he said, listen, Buggy, I don't know what's going on up there, but down here we have a third tradition, and it says that the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And your father had that desire, he wouldn't keep coming back. And so he is a member of our home group, and we bury our own. Mm-hmm. You're the finest people in the whole wide world. You are the finest people in the whole wide world. No one else would do that. And so I have the gift of gratitude tonight. I have a gift of gratitude to God, this program, and most of all to you people. Always end with the same joke. Sorry if you've heard it before, but it's my favorite joke. It's not mine, it's Bob. Well, Bob's still alive. Bobby's. 2 men drinking in a bar in Alaska. One was a very religious man, one was an atheist. Atheist said to the very religious man, I don't believe in your God. Very religious man said, why not? Atheist said, well, I gave your God a chance to prove himself and he failed. Very religious man said, well, tell me about it. Atheist said, well, about 3 months ago I was stuck 150 miles north of town in a blinding snowstorm. And I knew I'd die if I didn't get help, and I knelt down in the snow and I said, dear God, please help me. Very religious man looked at the He said, well, surely you must believe you're here. Atheist said, no, some damned Eskimo came along and showed me the way back to town. 28 years ago, I was stuck in a blinding snowstorm 150 miles north of town. And God sent an Eskimo by the name of Bob. Numerous times in the last 28 years, I've been stuck in that same snowstorm, that same 150 miles north of town. And God's always sent an Eskimo to drag me back to town to a meeting Alcoholics Anonymous, stick my butt in the feet and tell me shut up and listen. If you have any problems in your life tonight, I'll pray that God sends you an Eskimo. Look out for somebody who says, get in the car. I believe in the power of prayer. Tonight when I kneel down at my bedside, I will ask the God of my understanding if each and every one of you can have 24 more hours of this life. If you happen to have a God of your understanding, if you happen to be in communication with that God anytime in the near future, and if you happen to remember it, I would deeply appreciate it if you'd ask the God of your understanding if I can have 24 more hours of this life, because I absolutely love it. Thank you all very much for 12-stepping me one more time tonight.